All right, hello everyone. This is video 2 of Lookup week. Yesterday we had a quick look at XLOOKUP. Hopefully you managed to look at the worksheets for that function. It's definitely my lookup function of choice. I think it's most people's lookup function of choice nowadays if you've got modern Excel. But let's still look at a few other options. So firstly, I'm on a new version. So if you want to download this, I'm on version 2.01. The way I run version control generally, by the way, is if it's a minor tweak, then I'll update the second part of the number, version 1.01 to 1.02. And then if it's a bit more significant, or if you're in like a bidding environment or something, then you're going through certain gateways, then I would do a major version update. So we're on 2.01, and the reason why I've done a major update is I've just added a few bits around Xmatch. In reality, this workbook should have an Xmatch tab of its own, and I just don't have it ready-made, but I will try and add it over the coming weeks because Xmatch is certainly worth the time to learn. We'll touch on it a little bit though. So I'm going to talk about index and match today. Index and match has been, up until the addition of XLOOKUP, my go-to set of functions of choice. Certainly over VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, and I think I probably made that point yesterday and somewhere in the workbook. I don't like those two. I think they're a bit risky. I think the syntax is awkward. Index and match has always been my go-to because it's nice and flexible. It can update if your structure of data updates. And I still think we're going to have a period of time where you're either dealing with other people who haven't got the most recent versions of Excel, so they don't have access to XLOOKUP, or they haven't learned it, they're not comfortable with it, or you might be receiving models from other people that still use things like index and match. So I think it's well worth the time to just make sure you know how to use these two. So we'll look at them individually first, and then the power of these two really does come for almost every situation when you put them together. Index, really simply, if you think of what we did with XLOOKUP yesterday, index does essentially one half of it. So you say with index, look, here's a range of data or an array of data. Tell me which value or item within that range, the position of that value or item you would like me to return, and I'll give it to you. So here we're saying with a hard-coded 3, look at that range of data and pull out the item that is in the third position, top to bottom, left to right. And that is 1, 2, 3, vegetarian pie. So that formula is going to give you vegetarian pie because it's in the third position in the list. Now, as a standard kind of run through, clearly we'd prefer not to use hard-coded numbers in a formula. So we could pull the 3 out into a cell, but that's still quite manual. So there are better solutions to this. I just make the point here that this still works if your data is horizontal. So there's no worries there. Here's something that I think is a really nice use case for index on its own for financial modeling set situations. Here's what I would say is a reasonably standard and simplified version of like a scenario tool in a financial model. Quite often what you'll see modelers do is they'll use the names of the scenarios as the kind of lookup feature. But if you can build your model so that the scenario switch is driven by the number, even if it's indirectly the number, so you're picking from a drop down with the name of the scenario, but off the back of that you've got a match or an index that is looking at the number, then you can use a really simple index function to pull through the information you want from the scenario case that you want. So here, the live scenario cell is here, and you're picking the number of the scenario. All of those numbered scenarios have a name, worst case, mid, 1, 2, 3, best case, and then they would have a bunch of other values alongside them. When I did the FMI's CFM exam in October 2023, this was one of the challenges that I had to do. I had to build an entire scenario, like layer on a scenario module on top of an existing model. And this is pretty much exactly what I was doing, going through, using index linked to a scenario switch. So really, really useful. And again, other use cases for index on its own. If you think of any set of data in a particular order, index is going to give you the value that is in whatever position you have set it up in. So take dates as an example. You might have dates set up in an order in your inputs tab that are in calendar year order. They might be in tax year order. And depending on what the order of those dates are set up in, obviously you're going to get a different return for whatever number you enter as a position. So if I wanted the date in position 4 from this list, it's going to give me July 18. You can see when we first trained this kind of stuff. If I wanted this to be in calendar year, then I would be setting up a list with January 1st, and then position 4 would return April. Same with days of the week. So if I had a list that had the days of the week, Monday through to Sunday, if I was then trying to lean on a simple index function, I would know that, if I enter a 3, I'm going to get Wednesday back somewhere. Here's a really nice use case, again, for financial modeling, where I think you can avoid the need for an index match and you can just lean on a simple index. So let's imagine we had something like seasonality assumptions across a year, sales seasonality. So here's my input list that I would have on my inputs tab. Quite often what you'll see modelers do, and this is what I used to train, was you would need some sort of helper lookup row or column or field or something to return the values that you want. So maybe we would be looking at setting up a row here that said, Jan, Feb. You'd be doing this dynamically off the dates, not typing them in manually, but March. And then you could use that as the lookup reference for these cells here to then return the seasonality that you want by period. But what most financial models will have is some sort of month counter, a rolling calendar year month counter, a rolling tax year month calendar. And you can actually just use that if you've got the list set up in order to leverage a simple index. So here we go. I've got a calendar month counter that goes from 1 to 12 and then returns back to 1. And if you've got that in your model, if you want to get the seasonality through, you don't need to do any kind of clever match. You just use the month number and you look straight at the field of data that you want to return values from. So I think that's really nice. A nice little use case where index on its own can simplify the calculation logic of your financial models. But let's go on to match. Match does the second part of this. So what we get in XLOOKUP in one go, index and match do separately. Match will tell you the position of something within a range or an array. So here we are looking up the range of product names and we're asking match in which position is lamb pie. And it's telling us it's in position 2. For some of you, if you've not used this before, hopefully you can immediately see how index and match go together. You've got match that's going to tell you the position of an item within a range, an index that is going to look for guidance on the position to look for, and then return whatever that item is within another range. So the tricky bit with match is here. So you've got different match types, and the default typically when you're looking for text, like those product lookups we were just doing there, the match that you would typically go to is 0, which is an exact match. Interestingly, it's not the match that is set as default. So it's set as a 1, I'm pretty sure, as default. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's a 1, which is quite unusual. But what we would typically look for with text is a 0, and sometimes we would not want an exact match. So if you are looking at sort of numbers, maybe things like categories, date ranges, it might be the case that we want something other than an exact match. So here's an example. Let's say that we want to sort of find 275 within a list of categories. Now, if we wanted to find the exact match, with a 0 at the end of match, we're going to get a hash NA because that exact number isn't in this list of values. So we could use something like a 1 to look for the largest value in the list, the position of the largest value in the list that is less than the number we're looking for. And in this case, that would be 2. So it's saying the largest number that is less than 275 is in position 2 in our list here, in our range. So what about if we looked for the smallest value that is greater than the number we're looking for? Well, then we stumble upon a bit of a limitation with match. So we can try it. -1 will look for the smallest value that is greater than the number, but your data has to be set up in a specific way. So the values here, if you're looking for the smallest number that is greater than the number you're looking for, the values have to be structured in descending order. And if you were looking for the largest number that is less than or equal to the lookup value, the values must be sorted in ascending order. And this is one of the key upgrades that you get with XMatch, where the range of data that you're looking at doesn't have to be sorted. So here we go. I did say it. I wasn't sure. So if nothing is entered in the match type, it defaults to 1, which I think is really a little bit unusual, to be honest. It would make more sense for me if it was set as a default to 0, but it's not. I think that's all I wanted to share with you on match on its own. As ever, there's a few exercises you can try here. Index and match. So let's look at the value of bringing these two functions together. This is really exactly what we are doing with XLOOKUP, just with the older functions. So here we are returning the price of lamb pie from our table of data. How are we doing it? Well, match is firstly giving us the position of the lamb pie reference within this range. And then index is looking at the price range and it's returning the item in position 2. So it's dynamic. If we change what we're looking for to vegetarian pie, then the returned price will update dynamically, which I think is great. As ever with this, you can go through a few kind of simple steps that we talked through in terms of, how do we apply this in real life? This is the bit that I added in the new version. So XMatch versus match. If we have our data set up, again, this is an extension of the example that I just walked through. Let's say that we had customer revenue categories. So by month, if a customer purchases a certain number of items of what you're selling, then they will go in a particular category and maybe earn a discount or something like that. So we've got some sales volume figures for a customer for months 1 through to 6. And what we want to know is what category does this customer fall in each of those months? Well, we can use index match as long as the data is sorted in the right order. So here we're doing a -1 search. The data is sorted in descending order. And that means if you look at this, we're saying, okay, this customer has purchased 39 units in month 1. What category are they in? Well, we can't find 39 exactly in this list. We've just got upper and lower limits. But we can use that upper limit field to say, all right, we'll look for the smallest number that is bigger than the exact number that I'm looking for. And that means that it's going to be in category 1. Month 2, we've got up to 265 units purchased, which means you jump into category 2 and so on and so forth. But we try that again, but this time, so the exact same search, but this time the range of data that we're looking at is in the wrong order. So it's still in an order, but now it's in ascending order. Well, match is going to die on you. It's not going to work. And this is where XMatch comes in. So XMatch gives you a few more options in terms of match mode and search mode options. But actually, most importantly, your data doesn't have to be sorted in order. So it can look at the data quite intelligently and kind of order itself for you. And I just added a bit below here just to prove that point. So here I've actually broken the order of those categories so that they're not in ascending or descending order. And what you'll see here is X match still works and match doesn't work with either of the match modes. Now the search, I'll just touch on this quickly. The search mode I think is more relevant for dealing with lists where you know there's repetition of items. I could take the -1 off and put it to 1 and it will still give me the right answer, because remember, it doesn't need to be sorted, that list. It's looking at the list quite intelligently and doing the ordering itself. Just take that off before I forget. There you go. So that's all I've got on X match at the moment, but I think it's well worth your time. Looking back at index and match together, you can do two-dimensional lookups. So again, if you just ignore even match for the moment, if you highlight a range with index, you can then kind of almost kind of do this kind of cross-section of indexing, which is going to look at the column and the row reference within your range. And I thought this was quite interesting. Diarmuid showed me this. So actually, if within your index you just put a 0 for the row or the column reference, it's going to return everything. So you could use something like an index to highlight an entire array, and then use something like a choose cols to pick a specific row or column from that array if you wanted to. The only thing I did note is with modern Excel, to be honest, if you just wanted the array, you can literally just highlight the array and you get the array back. But I think there's probably something quite nice if you at times wanted to pick a row or column, but sometimes you wanted to just return the whole array, then you've got a few options there with index. And then finally, if you think of what we were doing with index and that two-dimensional match, you can use match twice, essentially to have a very, very dynamic two-dimensional lookup. So here we go. Here's an example. We've got our range of product prices across, I think it's prices, or it might just be sales value, sales volumes. We've got a range now that spans multiple rows and columns, and we've got two lookups here. So we are looking up a particular product and we're looking at a particular month. And depending on what we pick here, we're going to get that dynamic output from index match match. The only thing that I guess I don't like is for less experienced modelers, I think that's starting to look a bit nasty. It's actually not. But it's quite a long formula to do what you're doing, with a nested XLOOKUP if you're using XLOOKUP. I think that's all I wanted to show you. So there's a few extra exercises in here for you to have a go at. Let me know, like if you're using index and match still, let me know. For those of you that are really across X match, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how much value it adds versus match. And for those of you using XLOOKUP as well, if you want to share any stories about how useful XLOOKUP has been versus VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, index match, then I'd love to hear it. Thanks very much. See you tomorrow.